Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his ship and watched the stars through the big window. He had been a commander for 15 years, but today felt different. Today was the day humans would leave the galaxy forever. The Galactic Council had made their choice, and now humans would make theirs. The communication device on his desk made a soft sound. Lisa Carter's voice came through clearly from the colony below. She was in charge of New Denver Colony and had been Jake's friend since training school. Her voice sounded tired but determined. "Jake, we just finished loading the last transport ship," Lisa said. "All the families are on board. The children asked why we have to go. I told them we're going to find a better home." Jake looked at the data screen showing hundreds of human ships gathering in space. Every colony, every research station, every mining operation was packing up. The aliens thought they were getting rid of a problem. They had no idea what they were really losing. "What about the research data?" Jake asked. "Alex Turner is handling that from the science station," Lisa replied. "He's making sure the aliens don't get to keep our discoveries after they kick us out." Dr. Alex Turner sat in his laboratory surrounded by computers and data storage units. He had spent 20 years developing new technologies that helped all the species in the galaxy. His fusion reactors powered alien cities. His medical scanners saved alien lives. His communication systems connected worlds across space. Now, he was deleting everything. Alex typed commands on his keyboard and watched as years of work disappeared from the computers. The aliens had always taken credit for human inventions. They said humans were just good at building things, but not smart enough to really understand science. Soon they would learn how wrong they were. The door to his lab opened, and Dr. Kate Bennett walked in. She was carrying a small bag and looked sad. Kate had worked with alien doctors to cure diseases that killed millions. Her research had made vaccines that worked on different species. She had taught alien medical students for 10 years. "Are you really going to delete the medical database too?" Kate asked. Alex stopped typing and looked at her. "The council said, we're too dangerous to work with their people. Let's see how dangerous it is when their hospitals stop working." Kate nodded slowly. She understood. The Galactic Council had called humans violent and unpredictable after the incident on Zephyr Prime. One human ship had defended itself against pirates, and somehow that made all humans a threat to galactic peace. On Zephyr Prime, Captain Roy Patterson was shutting down the last human military base. The Zephyrian Empire had demanded that humans leave their space immediately. They said human weapons were too powerful, and human soldiers were too aggressive. Roy had tried to explain that humans only fought when attacked, but the aliens wouldn't listen. Roy walked through the empty base one last time. Human engineers had built this place to protect trade routes from pirates. Human soldiers had died defending alien merchant ships. Human mechanics had kept alien equipment running when their own people couldn't fix it. Now, the Zephyrians wanted them gone. "Sir," Sergeant Danny Walsh called out. Danny was the best engineer Roy had ever worked with. He could fix anything, and had taught many aliens how to maintain their equipment. "The power generators are ready for shutdown. Should I leave the instruction manuals?" Roy thought for a moment. The generators were complex machines that needed careful attention. Without proper maintenance, they would break down in a few months. The Zephyrians had never learned how to fix them properly. "Take the manuals with us," Roy said. "If they want us gone, they can figure it out themselves." Back on Jake's ship, the final reports were coming in. Commander Beth Collins sent a message from the diplomatic station near the council headquarters. Beth had been humanity's voice in the Galactic Senate for 8 years. She had negotiated peace treaties and trade agreements that benefited everyone. "Jake, I just finished my last meeting with the council," Beth's message said. "They actually seemed happy that we're leaving. Ambassador Thysek from the Selenites looked worried but didn't say anything. I think some of them know this is a mistake, but they're too proud to stop it." The Selenites had always been friendly with humans. Their ambassador had tried to speak against the exile order but was voted down. The Vorthak traders had also benefited from human partnerships, but stayed quiet during the council vote. Only the Catharians had openly supported keeping humans in the galaxy, but they were outnumbered. Jake, S navigation officer Carl Murphy, appeared on the bridge carrying a datapad. Carl had helped design the navigation systems used by most ships in the galaxy. His work made faster than light travel safer and more reliable. "Commander, I've loaded our destination coordinates," Carl said. Dr. Susan Hayes finished her calculations. She found a way to reach the space beyond the galactic rim. Her dimensional theory worked. Susan Hayes was humanity's best physicist. The aliens had called her theories impossible, but her math was perfect. She had discovered how to travel to places no one else could reach. If the galaxy didn't want humans, humans would find somewhere else to live. Ryan Johnson's voice came over the ship's communication system. He was the chief engineer on the industrial platform that supplied half the galaxy with manufactured goods. Human factories had provided everything from simple tools to complex starship parts. "All manufacturing systems are shut down," Ryan reported. "I've wiped the production databases and removed all the technical specifications." The aliens kept saying they could build everything themselves. Now they can prove it. Lisa Carter sent her final message from New Denver Colony. "Jake, we're ready to go. I've left a message for the Galactic Council. I told them exactly what they're losing. Maybe someday they'll understand." Jake looked around his bridge one last time. Human crew members worked at their stations, preparing for a journey into the unknown. These people had helped build galactic civilization. They had connected worlds, protected trade, advanced science, and saved lives across 100 different species. The aliens called them dangerous. The aliens said they were better off without humans. Soon the aliens would learn the truth. "All ships, this is Commander Morrison," Jake announced. "Begin departure sequence. We're going home." But home wasn't Earth anymore. Home was wherever. Humans could live free from those who feared them. The galaxy had made its choice. Now it would live with the consequences. The human fleet moved toward the edge of known space, leaving behind empty stations, silent factories, and a civilization that had just made the biggest mistake in its history. Captain Vexistar stared at the warning lights flashing red across his ship's control panel. 3 months had passed since the humans left, and his hyperdrive was failing again. This was the 4th breakdown this month. Before the humans disappeared, his ship had run perfectly for years without problems. Vex Quotar was a Vorthak trader who had worked with humans for 20 years. His ship carried goods between 12 different star systems, making him wealthy and respected among his people. Human engineers had always maintained his hyperdrive because they understood the complex systems better than anyone else. Now those engineers were gone, and Vextar didn't know how to fix his ship. "Computer, show me the maintenance records," Vexitar said in his native language. The computer displayed files that human engineer Pete Morrison had left behind. Pete had tried to teach Vexitar's crew how to maintain the hyperdrive, but the Vorthak mechanics never really understood. They could follow the steps but didn't grasp why each step mattered. The hyperdrive needed delicate adjustments that required understanding, not just following instructions. Humans had an intuitive sense for how machines worked that other species couldn't copy. They could feel when something was wrong and fix problems before they became serious. On the mining world of Kepler 442b, Foreman Grick watched another automated drill break down. The massive machine had worked perfectly for 15 years under human supervision. Now it sat silent and broken. The 3rd major equipment failure this week. Danny Walsh had been the human engineer in charge of the mining operation. He had tried to teach the local Catharian workers how to maintain the complex machinery, but they struggled with the concepts. The drilling systems required constant small adjustments based on changing ground conditions. Humans seemed to understand these machines like they were living things. They could hear when a motor sounded wrong or feel when vibrations indicated a problem. The Catharian workers were intelligent, but they approached machines differently, relying on precise procedures rather than intuitive understanding. Grick sent a message to his supervisors on the Catharian homeworld explaining the situation. The reply came back quickly. Find a way to fix the machines or the mining operation would be shut down. Thousands of jobs depended on this facility, and the rare minerals it produced were essential for starship construction. The galactic communication network began experiencing problems in its 4th month without humans. Master Technician Exile of the Vorthak Technical Guild tried desperately to understand the network's design, but the documentation made little sense. Human engineer Susan Hayes had built the network's core systems using principles that seemed simple on the surface, but were incredibly complex underneath. The network had to route messages instantly across thousands of light years, while accounting for stellar interference, gravitational effects, and quantum fluctuations. Zix, "EEL was brilliant by Vorthak standards, but the network's design required a type of thinking that didn't match how his species processed information. Humans could hold multiple contradictory ideas in their minds simultaneously and find solutions that bridged logical gaps. Other species excelled at linear thinking, but struggled with the intuitive leaps that human engineering required. The first major communication breakdown occurred when the relay station at Wolf 359 went offline. Messages that normally took seconds to cross the galaxy began taking hours or days. Some messages never arrived at all. Trade negotiations stalled when negotiators couldn't communicate reliably. Dr. Beth Collins had warned about this during her final speech to the Galactic Council. She had explained that human technology wasn't just about the machines themselves, but about the human understanding that made those machines work properly. The Council had dismissed her warnings as human arrogance. Now they were beginning to see. She had been right. On the medical research station at Centauri Base, Dr. Thisek of the Selenites struggled to continue the work that Dr. Kate Bennett had started. Kate had developed treatments that worked across species barriers, something that had seemed impossible before humans joined galactic society. Kate's research notes were detailed and complete, but they revealed a disturbing truth. Her breakthrough treatments required constant modification based on how different alien biologies responded to new diseases. She had developed an intuitive understanding of how various species' immune systems worked that couldn't be reduced to simple formulas. A plague broke out on Rigel 7, a respiratory infection that had been easily controlled with Kate's treatments. Dr. Thisek tried to apply her protocols, but the disease had mutated slightly. Kate would have recognized the mutation and adjusted the treatment accordingly. Thisek followed the protocols exactly but couldn't adapt when the situation changed. 12,000 Rigelians died in the first week. The Zephyrian Empire discovered that their military technology was failing in ways they hadn't expected. Admiral Vrex commanded the Empire's largest battle fleet, but his ships were becoming increasingly unreliable. Shield generators that had protected Zephyrian worlds for decades began experiencing random failures. The shields had been designed by human engineers who understood both the technical requirements and the tactical needs of space warfare. They had created systems that could adapt automatically to different types of attacks, learning and evolving as enemies changed their strategies. Without human oversight, the shields reverted to basic operating modes that were predictable and vulnerable. Pirates who had been easily defeated before began winning battles against Zephyrian patrol ships. Trade routes became dangerous as criminal organizations realized that Zephyrian defenses were weakening. Captain Roy Patterson had left detailed technical manuals when humans evacuated their military bases. The manuals explained how to operate Zephyrian military equipment, but didn't convey the tactical understanding that made that equipment effective. Humans had trained with Zephyrian soldiers, teaching them not just how to use their weapons but when and why to use them. Now, Zephyrian commanders found themselves losing battles they should have won easily. The Catharian Federation faced different problems. Their society had relied heavily on human diplomatic expertise to maintain peace between their various ethnic groups. Humans had an unusual ability to understand different perspectives and find compromises that satisfied everyone. Ambassador Lisa Carter had spent years mediating disputes between Catharian factions that had been fighting for centuries. Her approach had been based on human psychology and emotional intelligence, rather than rigid legal frameworks. She had helped create a system of governance that worked precisely because it was flexible and responsive to changing needs. Without human mediators, old conflicts began resurging. Catharian groups that had cooperated for decades started arguing over resource allocation and territorial boundaries. The Federation's carefully balanced political system began showing strain as different factions pursued their own interests without considering the broader consequences. Trade routes that had operated smoothly for years, began experiencing disruptions as various problems compounded each other. Ships broke down more frequently due to poor maintenance. Communications failures led to missed deliveries and confused schedules. Political instability made some regions too dangerous for merchant vessels. The Great Trade Compact that had connected hundreds of worlds began falling apart as member species struggled to maintain their obligations. What had seemed like a robust system revealed itself to be entirely dependent on human expertise in logistics, engineering, and conflict resolution. Ryan Johnson had coordinated manufacturing and shipping across dozens of star systems from his industrial platform. His work had ensured that critical supplies reached where they were needed when they were needed. The platform's automated systems continued operating, but without human oversight they couldn't adapt to changing conditions. A shortage of medical supplies on Vega Prime coincided with a surplus of the same supplies sitting unused in warehouses on nearby worlds. Before Ryan left, such imbalances had been corrected within hours. Now they persisted for weeks, causing unnecessary suffering and waste. As the fourth month began, representatives from various alien species started sending messages to the edge of known space, hoping to contact the departed humans. The messages offered apologies and requests for help, but received no response. The humans had vanished completely, leaving behind only empty facilities and the growing realization that galactic civilization had been built on foundations that no one else understood how to maintain. 6 months after the humans left, the galaxy was falling apart. Ambassador Thysic stood in the empty Galactic Council chambers and looked at the rows of vacant seats. Half the member species had withdrawn from the Council to deal with crises on their homeworlds. The remaining delegates spent most meetings arguing about whose fault the collapse was rather than trying to fix anything. Thys remembered when these chambers had been full of representatives from hundreds of worlds. The Council had made decisions that affected trillions of beings across thousands of light years. Now they struggled to maintain basic services in their own solar system. The Selenite homeworld was experiencing power shortages for the first time in 50 years. Their energy grid had been designed by human engineers who understood how to balance supply and demand across an entire planet. The system required constant small adjustments that Selenite technicians couldn't master. Chief Engineer Zixel had been trying for months to understand the power distribution network. The human manuals described what to do but not why it worked. Every day brought new problems as different parts of the system failed in ways that created cascade effects throughout. The grid. Rolling blackouts had become common in major Selenite cities. Hospitals operated on backup power, while factories shut down due to unreliable electricity. The Selenite government had authorized emergency rationing, but couldn't solve the underlying technical problems that caused the shortages. Dr. Kate Bennett had left detailed medical research files when humans departed, but her alien colleagues discovered that following her protocols wasn't enough. Kate had possessed an intuitive understanding of how different diseases affected various species that couldn't be replicated by reading her notes. On Tau Ceti Prime, a viral outbreak that should have been contained quickly spread through the population. Dr. Vrextal tried to apply Kate's treatment protocols, but the virus had mutated in ways that required modifying the approach. Kate would have recognized the changes and adapted her treatments accordingly. Without that adaptability, standard medical procedures that had worked for years became ineffective. The outbreak killed 40,000 beings before burning itself out naturally. Similar medical failures occurred on dozens of worlds as alien doctors struggled to handle situations that required the flexible thinking Kate had brought to galactic medicine. The Vorthak Merchant Guild faced the collapse of their trade empire as their ships became increasingly unreliable. Captain Vextar had managed to get his hyperdrive working again, but it broke down every few weeks, stranding him in remote star systems for days at a time. Worse, the navigation systems that human engineer Carl Murphy had designed were failing across the Vorthak fleet. Ships that had traveled the same routes for decades suddenly found themselves lost in hyperspace. 3 merchant vessels had simply vanished, presumably destroyed when their navigation computers miscalculated jump coordinates. The Guild had built their fortune on reliable, fast shipping that connected dozens of worlds in an efficient network. Human engineers had designed the systems that made this possible, creating automated routing algorithms that optimized cargo loads and delivery schedules. Without human maintenance, the network was breaking down into isolated fragments. Industrial production collapsed across multiple sectors as manufacturing systems designed by humans became inoperable. Rian Johnson had created automated factories that could produce everything from simple tools to complex starship components. These factories had supplied half the galaxy with manufactured goods for 20 years. The factories continued operating for several months after Rian left, but gradually began producing defective products. Quality control systems that had worked perfectly under human supervision started missing flaws that led to dangerous failures. A batch of faulty life support units caused a disaster on the mining station at Kepler 438b when the systems failed. Without warning, Foreman Grick had finally admitted defeat and shut down the mining operation on Kepler 442b. The automated drilling equipment that Danny Walsh had maintained was too complex for Catharian technicians to repair. Without steady production of rare minerals, starship construction slowed dramatically across multiple species territories. The Zephyrian Empire discovered that their military dominance had been built on human expertise rather than their own technological superiority. Admiral Vrex commanded a fleet of powerful warships, but his forces were losing battles against opponents they had easily defeated in the past. The shield generators that protected Zephyrian worlds were failing at critical moments. Captain Roy Patterson had designed these systems to adapt automatically to new threats, but without human oversight, they had reverted to predictable patterns that enemies could exploit. Piracy increased dramatically as criminal organizations realized that Zephyrian patrols were becoming less effective. Merchant ships that had traveled safely for years now required armed escorts that often proved inadequate. Several trade routes were abandoned entirely as they became too dangerous for commercial traffic. The Galactic Communication Network experienced its most serious failure yet when the primary relay station at Alpha Centauri went offline permanently. Master Technician Zixel had attempted repairs, but accidentally triggered a cascade failure that destroyed the station's core systems. Without Alpha Centauri, communication between the galactic core and outer rim territories became impossible. Species that had been in constant contact for decades suddenly found themselves isolated. Diplomatic negotiations broke down when ambassadors couldn't communicate with their home governments. Dr. Susan Hayes had designed the network to be self-repairing, but the automated systems required periodic recalibration that only humans understood how to perform. As more relay stations failed, the network fragmented into disconnected segments that couldn't coordinate with each other. The Catharian Federation dissolved into civil war as different ethnic groups fought for control of dwindling resources. Human diplomat Lisa Carter had spent years building trust between these groups, but her work unraveled quickly without continued human mediation. The conflict started over water rights on the agricultural world of Cathara Prime, but spread rapidly as old grievances resurfaced. Moderate leaders who had worked with humans were overthrown by extremists who blamed other ethnic groups for the Federation's problems. Within weeks, 3 Catharian factions were fighting a brutal war that displaced millions of civilians. The Federation's military split along ethnic lines, leaving no force capable of maintaining peace. Refugee camps overflowed with beings fleeing the violence. Food distribution systems that had fed billions of people began failing as agricultural worlds couldn't coordinate with population centers. Human logistics experts had created supply chains that efficiently moved food from farming planets to cities across hundreds of star systems. Commander Jake Morrison had overseen the orbital farming platforms around Vega Major that supplied protein to 12 different worlds. The platforms continued operating automatically but couldn't adjust production to meet changing demand. Some worlds faced shortages while others received more food than they could use before it spoiled. Emergency meetings of the remaining Galactic Council members accomplished nothing except finger-pointing and blame assignment. The Vorthak representative accused the Zephyrians of forcing humans to leave. The Zephyrian delegate blamed the Catharians for not supporting human integration. Everyone agreed the situation was bad, but no one knew how to fix it. Reports reached the Council of strange energy signatures detected at the edge of known space. Long-range sensors had picked up massive construction projects in regions where no civilization should exist. The energy reading suggested technology far more advanced than anything previously seen in the galaxy. Some council members wondered if the humans were building something in the void beyond galactic borders. Others dismissed such ideas as impossible, since humans had barely been capable of interstellar travel when they left. The debate continued while their civilization crumbled around them. Dr. Beth Collins had left one final message that played automatically every day in the empty council chambers. Her words echoed through the vast space as alien delegates tried desperately to solve problems they didn't understand. "You asked us to be less than we were," Beth's recording said. "We chose to be nothing to you instead. The galaxy made its choice. Now live with the consequences." The consequences were becoming clearer every day as more systems failed and more worlds fell into chaos. The beings who had feared human unpredictability now faced something far worse: predictable decay that they couldn't stop or reverse. In the darkness between stars, automated probes continued broadcasting desperate messages toward the galactic rim, hoping to reach the humans who had vanished without a trace. The messages offered any terms, any concessions, any apology necessary to bring humanity back. The void remained silent. 1 year after humanity vanished from the galaxy, Ambassador Thysic stood before the emergency assembly of what remained of the Galactic Council. Only 37 delegates occupied chambers that once held representatives from over 300 worlds. The rest had withdrawn to deal with crises that threatened their very survival. "Fellow council members," Thysic began, his voice echoing in the nearly empty hall, "we must face the truth. Our civilization is collapsing. Half of our member species have lost the ability to maintain basic infrastructure. Trade has decreased by 70%. Over 200 million beings have died from causes that were easily preventable when humans lived among us." The Vorthak delegate, Captain Zexlar, shifted uncomfortably in his seat. His own trade empire had been reduced to operating cargo ships between 3 systems, instead of the 50 routes his guild had once covered. Most of their vessels sat grounded, too unreliable to risk in space. "The Vorthak Guild supports launching the Great Search immediately," Zexlar announced. "We must find the humans and convince them to return. Our survival depends on it." Admiral Crix of the Zephyrian Empire stood slowly. His once proud military uniform looked worn and faded. The empire that had demanded human exile now struggled to maintain order within its own borders. "The Zephyrian Empire will contribute 200 warships to the search fleet," Crix stated. "Our best remaining vessels with our most experienced crews. We must admit our mistake and ask for human forgiveness." The irony wasn't lost on anyone present. The same military that had called humans dangerous now needed human help to function properly. Their advanced weapon systems had become unreliable without human maintenance. Their tactical computers made errors that cost lives in battles against pirates and rebels. Dr. Vrextel of the Medical Consortium presented the health crisis statistics. "Without human medical expertise, we've lost the ability to treat diseases that cross species barriers. The plague on Rigel 7 killed 3 million beings. The respiratory virus on Deneb 9 claimed another 2 million. These diseases were easily controlled when Dr. Kate Bennett worked with us. The search for humanity became the largest coordinated effort in galactic history. Captain Zarath commanded a fleet of over 500 ships from dozens of species, all devoted to finding any trace of the missing humans. They searched every system humans had ever visited, every abandoned station, every possible hiding place. The search teams found empty facilities that had been meticulously cleaned before. Abandonment. Human colonies had been evacuated so completely that barely any trace remained. Personal belongings, technical manuals, research data, everything had been taken or destroyed. A New Denver colony. Searchers found only empty buildings and a single message carved into the memorial plaza. "We offered partnership. You chose dominion. Live with the consequences." The words were signed by Lisa Carter, the colony administrator who had tried to maintain friendly relations with alien neighbors until the very end. At the research station where Dr. Alex Turner had worked, investigators discovered that the computer systems had been wiped so thoroughly that even deleted files couldn't be recovered. 20 years of scientific breakthroughs had been erased completely. The aliens realized they had lost more knowledge in one day than some civilizations accumulated in centuries. The industrial platform, where Ryan Johnson had coordinated manufacturing across multiple star systems, contained automated factories that still operated but produced increasingly defective goods. Quality control systems designed by humans couldn't be repaired by alien technicians who didn't understand the underlying principles. A critical failure at the platform's main reactor forced its evacuation, ending production of essential components needed throughout the galaxy. Starships couldn't be repaired, communication equipment couldn't be replaced, and medical devices couldn't be manufactured without the specialized parts the platform had provided. Search teams discovered something disturbing at the edge of explored space. Long-range sensors detected massive energy signatures in regions where no known civilization existed. The readings suggested construction projects on a scale that dwarfed anything previously seen in the galaxy. Captain Jake Morrison's exploration vessel had been tracked as far as the Perseus Arm before all trace disappeared. The energy signatures were detected in the same general direction, leading some to speculate that humans had found or built something extraordinary in the void beyond galactic borders. Dr. Susan Hayes's theoretical work on transdimensional travel was studied by the galaxy's best physicists, but her calculations were too advanced for most species to understand. Her theories suggested that travel between different realities might be possible, raising the possibility that humans had left not just the galaxy, but this dimension entirely. On Kepler 442b, the mining operation that Foreman Grick had been forced to shut down became a symbol of galactic decline. The automated drilling equipment sat silent and useless while nearby worlds desperately needed the rare minerals it had once produced. Grick had tried for months to train local workers to maintain the complex machinery, but human intuitive understanding couldn't be taught through instruction manuals. Similar failures occurred across hundreds of worlds, as systems designed by humans broke down without proper maintenance. The galaxy had become dependent on human expertise without realizing it. When humans left, they took with them the knowledge that held everything together. The Selenite homeworld experienced total power grid failure when the main distribution center overloaded beyond repair. Chief Engineer Zixel had been trying to balance energy loads manually, but couldn't match the intuitive adjustments that human engineers had made automatically. The blackout lasted 3 weeks and caused thousands of deaths in hospitals and life support facilities. Emergency generators kept essential services running, but the Selenites faced the reality that their technological civilization might not survive much longer without human help. Similar power failures began occurring on other worlds as aging infrastructure designed by humans deteriorated beyond alien abilities to maintain. The Catharian Federation's civil war intensified as different factions blamed each other for the loss of human support. Moderate leaders who had worked with human diplomats were assassinated by extremists who claimed that human influence had corrupted Catharian culture. The irony was that human diplomatic methods had been specifically designed to preserve Catharian cultural identity while enabling cooperation between different groups. Human mediator Lisa Carter had spent years learning Catharian history and psychology to develop approaches that respected their values, while building bridges between opposing factions. Without human mediation, the Catharians reverted to ancient patterns of ethnic conflict that had plagued their species for millennia. Cities that had been peaceful for decades became battlegrounds. Refugee camps overflowed with displaced families fleeing the violence. The galactic communication network suffered its final collapse when the central hub at Terra Nova went offline permanently. Master Technician Zixel had attempted emergency repairs but triggered a cascade failure that destroyed the station's quantum processing cores. Without the central hub, the remaining relay stations couldn't coordinate with each other. Messages that had once traveled instantly across the galaxy now took weeks to reach their destinations, if they arrived at all. Diplomatic negotiations became impossible when ambassadors couldn't communicate with their governments. Trade ground to a halt as merchant ships couldn't coordinate with cargo handlers or customs officials. The economic system that had connected hundreds of worlds dissolved into isolated fragments that couldn't interact efficiently. Reports of successful human colonies reached the Council through rumors and unconfirmed sightings. Merchant crews claimed to have seen human ships in distant systems always too far away to intercept. These humans appeared to be thriving, their technology more advanced than ever. Some reports described human vessels that could travel faster than light without using conventional hyperdrives. Others mentioned construction projects that seemed to violate known laws of physics. The humans hadn't just survived their exile, they had apparently transcended the limitations that constrained other species. The Council authorized increasingly desperate attempts to contact humanity. Automated probes were launched toward the galactic rim, carrying messages that offered unlimited concessions in exchange for human assistance. The probes transmitted apologies, promises of autonomy, and pleas for help that grew more frantic as conditions worsened. No responses were ever received. Dr. Beth Collins' final address to the Council was played repeatedly on what remained of the communication network. Her words had seemed like human arrogance at the time, but now sounded like prophetic warnings that no one had heeded. "You think you're removing a threat," Beth had said. "You're amputating your own hands. Humanity built the bridges that connected your worlds. Without us, you'll discover just how dark the space between stars really is." The darkness was spreading as more systems failed and more worlds fell into isolation. The galaxy that had once been united was fragmenting into desperate survivors struggling with technology they couldn't maintain and problems they couldn't solve. 2 years had passed since humanity vanished from the galaxy, and the collapse was complete. Ambassador Thyssek sat alone in the Galactic Council chambers, staring at hundreds of empty seats that would never be filled again. He was the only remaining delegate, the last witness to what had once been the greatest civilization in known space. The Selenite homeworld had gone dark 6 months ago, when their power grid suffered a final, irreversible failure. Chief Engineer Zixel had died trying to repair the main distribution center, electrocuted by systems he never fully understood. Without power, the underground cities that housed billions of Selenites became uninhabitable tombs. Refugee ships had evacuated less than 10% of the population before their fleet broke down in space. The survivors now lived in crowded camps on agricultural worlds, dependent on charity from species that could barely maintain their own basic needs. Thys, Eek, had received the final transmission from Selenite Prime 3 days before the power failed, completely. The message was brief and heartbreaking. "Tell the humans we're sorry. Tell them we understand now." The Vorthak Trade Guild had dissolved entirely after their remaining ships became too unreliable to operate safely. Captain Vexistar had died when his vessel's hyperdrive exploded, during what should have been a routine jump to the Procyon system. The explosion was caused by a maintenance error that human engineer Pete Morrison would have spotted immediately. The Guild's commercial empire, which had once connected dozens of worlds in an efficient network of trade routes, existed now only in abandoned warehouses and rusting spaceports. Cargo that would never be delivered sat rotting in storage facilities that no one could afford to maintain. Captain Zexelar, the Guild's former representative to the Council, now worked as a manual laborer on Vega Colony, loading cargo by hand onto the few ships that still functioned. He had tried repeatedly to repair Guild vessels using the technical manuals that humans had left behind, but the instructions required understanding that his species apparently lacked. The Zephyrian Empire had collapsed into warring city-states after their military technology became completely unreliable. Admiral Vrex commanded a fleet of powerful warships that couldn't maintain orbit without constant manual adjustments. Their weapon systems fired randomly, their shields failed without warning, and their navigation computers provided coordinates that led ships into stars. The empire that had once dominated a quarter of the galaxy now controlled only 3 solar systems. Zephyrian worlds that had been peaceful for centuries were ravaged by civil wars. As different factions fought over the few remaining functional pieces of technology, Admiral Crix had committed ritual suicide after his flagship's life support failed during a battle with rebels suffocating his entire crew. His final message blamed himself for supporting the decision to exile humanity, calling it the greatest strategic error in Zephyrian history. The Catharian Federation no longer existed as a political entity. The civil war that had started over resource distribution had evolved into a genocidal conflict that threatened to exterminate entire ethnic groups. Moderate leaders who had worked with human diplomats had all been killed, leaving only extremists who preferred destruction to compromise. Lisa Carter's carefully built diplomatic framework which had maintained peace between Catharian factions for over a decade, had been torn apart in a matter of months. The psychological insights she had used to bridge cultural differences died with her departure, leaving the Catharians unable to remember why they had once cooperated. Refugee camps that had once housed displaced civilians were now mass graves. The Catharian homeworld was covered with the ruins of cities destroyed by their own inhabitants. Population estimates suggested that over half the species had perished in the fighting. Dr. Vrextal sat in his empty laboratory on the medical research station and stared at the files Kate Bennett had left behind. 3 more plagues had swept through alien populations in the past 6 months, killing millions of beings whose deaths could have been prevented with proper medical treatment. Kate quotes, research notes described treatments for diseases that hadn't even existed when she wrote them. Her understanding of how different species' immune systems worked had allowed her to predict how diseases would evolve and develop countermeasures in advance. Without that predictive ability, alien medical systems could only react to outbreaks after they occurred. By then it was usually too late to prevent massive casualties. The medical knowledge that had saved billions of lives was gone forever, along with the human intuition that had made it possible. The industrial platform where Ryan Johnson had coordinated manufacturing across multiple star systems had been abandoned after a reactor breach made it uninhabitable. The explosion was caused by a cascade failure in safety systems that required human oversight to function properly. The platform's destruction ended production of critical components needed throughout the galaxy. Medical equipment couldn't be repaired, communication devices couldn't be replaced, and transportation systems couldn't be maintained without the specialized parts it had manufactured. Similar industrial facilities throughout the galaxy sat idle, their automated systems either broken beyond repair or producing defective goods that caused more problems than they solved. The manufacturing base that had supported galactic civilization for decades had crumbled to nothing. In the deep archives of the abandoned research station, investigators found Dr. Alex Turner's personal logs describing the true scope of human contributions to galactic technology. His records revealed that 78% of major technological advances in the past century had originated from human research, though credit had usually been given to alien scientists. Faster than light communication, universal medical, protocols, automated terraforming, quantum computing, fusion reactor design, artificial gravity generation. All of these fundamental technologies had been developed by humans working in collaboration with alien colleagues who had claimed the credit. The aliens had convinced themselves that humans were just good at building things but lacked the intelligence for true scientific understanding. Turner's logs proved that human theoretical work had provided the foundation for galactic civilization itself. Foreman Grick's mining operation on Kepler 442b had become a monument to galactic decline. The sophisticated drilling equipment that Danny Walsh had maintained sat rusting in the alien weather, too complex for local workers to understand or repair. The rare minerals it had once extracted were desperately needed for the few remaining functional facilities throughout the galaxy. Similar mining operations, manufacturing centers, research facilities, and agricultural platforms had been abandoned across hundreds of worlds as aliens discovered they couldn't maintain the infrastructure humans had built for them. The technological civilization that had seemed so robust was revealed to be entirely dependent on human expertise. Long-range sensors continued detecting massive energy signatures from beyond the galactic rim, but the readings were now so far advanced that they defied conventional physics. Whatever humanity was building in the void had become something that transcended normal understanding of technology and engineering. Dr. Susan Hayes's theoretical work on trans-dimensional travel was finally decoded by a team of physicists from multiple species working together. Her equations suggested that humans had discovered not just how to leave the galaxy, but how to access entirely different realities, where the laws of physics operated according to different principles. The implications were staggering. Humanity hadn't just found a new home, they had apparently found a way to transcend the limitations that bound other species to a single universe. They had become something greater than any civilization the galaxy had ever imagined possible. Captain Jake Morrison's final message, broadcast to the galaxy just before the human fleet disappeared beyond sensor range, was discovered in the archives of the defunct communication network. His words carried a weight that no one had understood at the time. We offered you partnership, and you demanded submission. We offered you knowledge, and you claimed ownership. We offered you friendship, and you responded with fear. The galaxy chose to see us as a threat rather than an opportunity. Now you'll face the darkness alone and discover what real threats look like. Reports reached Thesek of strange visitors appearing at the edge of explored space. Ships that moved, faster than light without using hyperdrives. Beings that seemed human but possessed capabilities that bordered on the supernatural. These visitors observed alien civilizations from a distance, but never made contact. The visitors seemed to be studying the collapse of galactic civilization with scientific detachment, recording the consequences of the decision to exile humanity. They showed no hostility, but also no inclination to provide assistance to the species that had rejected them. Some alien survivors claimed the visitors were humanity's children, beings who had been born in the space beyond the galaxy and grown up with access to technologies and knowledge that their parents had discovered in exile. These new humans supposedly viewed the old galaxy as a failed experiment that held no interest for them. The last functioning relay station in the Galactic Communication Network broadcast a continuous emergency message toward the void where humanity was believed to exist.